Hello, everybody. I am Xavier Stephen, pediatrician, hepatologist, working in Brussels, Belgium. We are living liver transplant center, and we do around 30 liver transplants a year, principally living donor liver transplantation. So when a patient comes in our unit, coming from abroad or sent by another medical doctor, during the pre-transplant checkup, we have to answer two questions. The first one is, do we have to do the liver transplantation? And the second one, are there any contraindications to do it? This seems simple, but that's really important when you face the patient. The main classical indication of liver transplantation remains a patient with a biliary atresia with decompensated cirrhosis. Decompensated cirrhosis means jaundice, ascites, upper GI bleeding due to coagulopathy and portal hypertension, possibly liver insufficiency, encephalopathy clinically, but also at electroencephalogram, and other complication of chronic evolution of cirrhosis, hepatopulmonary syndrome, portopulmonary hypertension, hepatorenal syndrome, sometimes repetition of infection cholangitis, but also each type of cirrhosis can lead to liver cancer, hepatocarcinoma. We do not transplant only cirrhotic patients. We have also indication because of tumor, and the most prevalent one remains hepatoblastoma, when the tumor is diffused to the liver, but also sometimes because of quality of life, bad quality of life, fatigue for a cirrhotic patient, scratching, classically for the patient with progressive familial cholestasis or Alagille syndrome, when there is no response to a classical drug treatment, or when there is no response to enterohepatic cycle interruption by a drain or bar surgery. This table is not so easy, but what we have to retain when you face a metabolic disorder is that is this metabolic disorder only related to the liver, or do we have a disease with other organs involved? On the left part of the table, these are normal liver parenchyma, and on the right part of the table, these are liver disease leading to cirrhosis, where the benefit of the liver transplant is also of interest. The decision of the liver transplant depends of the kind of the disease you will face, and you have to answer question by question. When you have a metabolic disorder only related to a liver disease, the enzymes is only expressed in the liver, when you will do the liver transplant, you will cure the disease, even if it's an acute liver failure or a chronic liver failure. But when you have other organs involved, you have to discuss the interest of a combined transplant. For example, both kidney and liver transplant in some types of metabolic aciduria, such as methylmalonic aciduria. And if you only do the liver transplant, you are not fully curative. So to decide how you will cure the disease, you have to know perfectly the metabolic disorder, kind of expression of the disease. Are there contraindications to liver transplant? That's always difficult, of course, but this is very rare. The most classical ones are extrahepatic metastasis in case of hepatocarcinoma, where you do not have other treatment than liver transplant. Severe portopulmonary hypertension with a high risk of death during the surgery, and sometimes neurological contraindications due to sequelae, maybe in urea cycle disorder or evolutive metabolic disease, such as some kinds of mitochondriopathies. As I already told you, we are living donor liver transplant center, and when you will use a related donor, you have to know that in metabolic disorder, you will use a heterozygous donor. So this means that the new liver will be heterozygous for the disease, and you have to know the evolution of these heterozygous donors and adapt your follow-up. The pre-transplant checkup is teamwork, of course. We have transplant coordinators, pediatricians, surgeons, radiologists, anesthesists, psychologists, and many other guys involved in the pre-transplant checkup. This slide is here to show you that we are treating patients coming from abroad. So they come from other countries here in our center in Belgium. And of course, they come with a medical history. We have to meet each other. And at the end, confident relation is really of importance. When a patient comes to our center from abroad, we have to determine if the right diagnosis was performed. And most of the patients we receive have a biliary atresia with or not a Kasai surgery. And we will not perform a full differential diagnosis. We want really to exclude treatable causes, and this means galactosemia or tyrosinemia. But if we have decided that the liver transplant has to be done, we can also work with the explanted liver to determine the right diagnosis. It could be done, of course, post-transplant. During the pre-transplant checkup, we want to obtain the best nutritional status. And for this, in most of the cases, we will use a specific milk called Heparin Junior, rich in medium chain triglycerides, rich in branched amino acids with small quantities of salt, small quantities of copper, and a highly caloric diet. This will allow to go to the transplant safely because of the best nutritional status. We will, of course, determine the neurological status of the patient. determine if there are signs of encephalopathy thanks to electroencephalogram. And we have also to determine the bacteriological status of the patient. Most of these patients have received a lot of antibiotics in previous countries, and so they have a lot of multi-resistant bacteria. Sometimes these patients are not vaccinated in their country, and we have to restart a full vaccination program because it's really important to obtain it before the liver transplant. When these patients have ascites, they have small lung volumes, and sometimes they have respiratory distress. We just have to treat this patient with diuretics, sometimes punctures, but we try to avoid it. And sometimes we have to let drainage of this ascites. The hemodynamics part of the transplant checkup is especially to determine if this patient has hepatopulmonary syndrome or portopulmonary hypertension, and sometimes we have to perform heart catheterism if we have a doubt after the classical cardiac ultrasound. The kidney function is of course determined during this pre-transplant checkup with biological testing, but also with 24-hour urine test. Sometimes, such as Alagille syndrome, you can already have renal insufficiency, and sometimes in biliary atresia patients we can see renal cyst. One of the most classical reasons of death or complication before liver transplantation is upper GI bleeding, and this hemorrhagic risk is related to the liver insufficiency, but also to the portal hypertension. And in our team, we were able in a previous studies to determine hemorrhagic risk scoring system based on the grade of the varices. The higher the grade is, the higher the risk of bleeding is present. The presence of red spots on the varices, and what was really original is that we add in this score the fibrinogen concentration. And thanks to the specific algorithm, we can determine the bleeding probability and decide if we have to treat prophylactically the presence of varices in endoscopy. If we want to treat prophylactically varices, we can do banding. This is not always possible because of the size of the endoscope in small children. If it's not possible, you can imagine sclerosis, but we prefer to do sclerosis as a secondary prophylaxis. We will give antibiotics if there is a bleeding, and you can give somatostatin, and sometimes you have to do a mechanical tamponade. At the end of the pre-transplant checkup, we have to decide and answer the two questions that I explained at the start of the meeting. And all together, we will have a consensus. Yes, we have to go to the transplant. Yes, you can do it safely. No, there is no contraindication. The day of the transplant is a special day, of course, and just after the transplant in the evening, when it's a living donor liver transplantation, they will go to the intensive care unit. They will stay there for 2 to 3 days when there is no complication, but sometimes it's a difficult period and long period if there are related complications. Just after the transplant, so we are now in the post-transplant period, the early post-transplant period. Of course, this patient will be monitored closely with blood tests every day, with ultrasound to monitor vascular anastomosis every day. We have, of course, to determine if there are complications such as artery thrombosis as soon as possible. Here is the classical immune suppression protocol we used. 2 doses of anti-interleukin-2 basiliximab. We have a tacrolimus monotherapy protocol. And if we suspect acute cell rejection, we will perform a liver biopsy, and based on the results of the biopsies, we will start corticosteroids with high dose of steroids, progressively tapered. The presence of cell rejection is measured by a Banff score, where you will evaluate portal veins, central-lobular veins, but also, of course, portal inflammation. This is a score on 9, and for each part of the score, you will add the score you obtain on 3. These are the classical drugs we used post-transplant. Of course, pain management with morphine with or without clonidine, with or without lorazepam. Most of these patients have hypertension post-transplant. We treat these patients with anticalcic drugs such as nifedipine. Sometimes we have to add beta blockers. Sometimes we have to add ACE inhibitor. To avoid artery thrombosis or portal thrombosis, we use a classical protocol of anticoagulation with aspirin. We do not use heparin, such as in other centers. And the antibiotic prophylaxis we use is based on ampicillin against enterococcus and tebocillin for gram-negative bacteria. The post-transplant antibiotics protocol will not target specific bacteriological carrying, but if we have signs of infection, of course, we will change it according to the bacterial status we obtain pre-transplant. During the 3 to 6 months post-transplant, we use antibioprophylaxis against Pneumocystis jirovecii with trimethoprim sulfametazole. And for the PCR infection or reinfection, we do not perform the universal prophylaxis, but the preemptive treatment if there are signs of infection. This means hepatitis, colitis, or lung infection. The patient at risk of PCR infection post-transplant are especially the negative recipient receiving positive CMV positive liver. What about Epstein-Barr virus? Again, our strategy is based for follow-up and treatment on the presence of symptoms. And symptoms means sometimes only throat infection, but also colitis, suspected adenopathy. And if we have symptoms, we will do full screening and then decide if we have to reduce immune suppression, stop immune suppression. But again, this way to follow the patient is a clinical way with a tracking of symptoms. If we suspect post-transplant lymphoproliferative disorder, we will perform a full assessment of the disease and discuss which are the best way to treat it. As I told you, most of our patients are transplanted from abroad, but anyway, for Belgian patients, this is the same. We really wanted to follow this patient for a long-term period. And what we want is, of course, that this patient will be socially inserted. This means frequent school for a child. They must have a normal growth. What we want is tacrolimus monotherapy. And thanks to ultrasound, fibroscan, we will follow the liver of this patient. We will also follow the potential complication of treatment by ophthalmological examination, echocardiography, kidney ultrasound, and all these exams are performed during 2 days of the post-transplant checkup. Classically, we do it 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years post-transplant, and then according to the evolution. During this post-transplant checkup, we will do a liver biopsy. And on this biopsy, we will determine if there are signs of inflammation, but also signs of fibrosis. And we will use a score published in the American Journal of Transplantation by Dr. Venturi. And this score will evaluate portal fibrosis, sinusoid fibrosis, and centrolobular fibrosis. Again, with a score such as the Banff score on 9, 3 for the portal tract, 3 for sinusoids, and 3 for centrolobular. In our team, Dr. Varma was able to determine that portal inflammation, probably due to low immune suppression, can lead to fibrosis. And this patient has to be followed because of this risk of long-term fibrosis. And we know from these studies published in eBiomedicine that class 2 anti-HLA antibodies or HLA DRB101 are determinants of possible fibrosis. And I think this is the last one. These 2 papers show that if you were able to do the liver transplant without complication, that the patient is under tacrolimus monotherapy, everything is okay. But at adolescence, you have also to repair risk of non-adherence to the treatment. And for this, you have to explain the patient how we will be able to self-care and the importance of this treatment. I thank you for your attention.